they threw them out. But they did something else. In order to humiliate the Jews, not only did they destroy the Jewish temple, which of course was the symbol of the Jewish people, they also changed the name of the territory. They knew that in the Bible, the Jews' greatest enemies were the Philistines. So they renamed the territory after the Jews' greatest enemies, the Philistines, and they called it Palestine. That's when the territory got that name. But it had been Israel at that point for something like almost 1,300 years. The Jews came back despite the Romans. And then in 638 A.D., the Muslims invaded and destroyed 40 Jewish cities and tried to expel the Jews. And the Jews came back again. I'm Jewish. And you know I'm very pro-Israel, so I am highly biased on this subject. But we came back over and over and over and over again. However, in Islam, at least in jihadist Islam, any territory that has ever been taken by conquest by Islam is holy to Islam. So, for example, Spain, which the Muslims occupied for 700 years, Spain is on the target list. It's something that the Muslims want to get back. Now, of course, the jihadists don't just want Spain. They don't just want Israel. They want the whole world. They're in 628 A.D., God, according to Muhammad, sat Muhammad down and unrolled the scroll of the earth and said to Muhammad, all that you see on the west shall be yours. All that you see on the east shall be yours. The entire earth shall be yours. Now, that seemed ridiculous because the Arabs were a desert people that were almost entirely unknown. And according to the Arab historians, Muhammad sent out what he called his letters to the emperors. He picked the 6 biggest emperors who ruled the entire world that he knew of, and he sent them letters inviting them to Islam. And if they didn't accept the invitation to Islam, he implied that something else would have to be done with them. And when Chosroes, the emperor of Persia, got his letter, now the Persian Empire was huge. Today we know the Persian Empire as Iran. When the Persian emperor got this letter from Muhammad, he turned to his advisors and he said, who is this guy and what people does he come from? And the advisors said, Your Majesty, don't worry about a thing. This is a people so tiny, so insignificant, they are, for all practical purposes, desert fleas. They are people who herd camels and sheep. You will never hear of them again. Well, that turned out to be false advice, because within less than 150 years of Muhammad's death, Islam took territory 11 times the size of the conquests of Alexander the Great, 5 times the size of the Roman Empire, and twice or 7 times the size of the United States. It's the biggest empire in world history. And the Islamists, the jihadists, want that territory back, and they want the rest of the world, because God promised them all the world. Now, they want it not out of villainy, they want it out of idealism. Why? Because God made this planet, right? He made it out of a clot of mud. And God made you and me. He made us out of a clot of blood. And because God made us, it is obvious that we should be living not according to man-made rules, not according to rules made by parliaments and congresses. This is the Islamist point of view that I'm giving you, not mine. But it's obvious that because God made us, we should be living according to God's laws. And God gave his precise laws to Muhammad between 610 and 632 AD, or 622 and 632 AD. And the only way to live a just and righteous life is to live according to those laws. We call those laws Sharia. Now, here's the deal. Life is short, but in Islam, the afterlife is forever. And you either go to hell or you go to paradise. And hell is a nasty, mean, and vicious place. In hell, you are roasted over a spit, feeling every bit of pain as your skin is seared cell by cell by cell, until your skin finally falls off. And then you are given a new skin, so you will be forced to feel that pain all over again, and you are roasted until that skin falls off. And that goes on for eternity. So if you or I believed in this belief system, Islamist or jihadist Islam, we would want to save our fellow human beings. We would want to make sure that as many of them go to paradise as possible, and as few of them as possible go to that ghastly place called hell. So it would be obligatory upon us as idealists to take over the world. Why? To liberate all of humanity so it could go to paradise. If it doesn't live under God's own law, Sharia, it's not going to paradise. That is the Islamist way of thinking. And that is the way of thinking that is motivating Hamas in Gaza, that is motivating Hezbollah, another Iranian-supported group to the north of Israel in Lebanon, and that is motivating the Caliph, who calls himself now Caliph Ibrahim. He was Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi up until about 2 weeks ago, who runs what was formerly called the Islamic State of Iraq and Syria. And Caliph Ibrahim, and he now calls it the Islamic State, and he's named himself Caliph. Well, he's also provided a map for his 5-year plan. And what is his 5-year plan? It's to take all of northern Africa, all the way over to the Atlantic Ocean, and to take Spain, which, after all, was once Islamic territory. Well, that same impulse that tells these jihadists that it is their obligation to take Spain as quickly as possible because it's their territory, they had it for 700 years, tells them that since they conquered at one point Israel, and since they threw the Jews out, it's their territory. Well, I'm sorry, as a Jew and as a member of a tribe that's been there for 3,200 years, a lot longer than they have, I tend to disagree with them. Of course, it's easy to disagree with me, but nonetheless, I think that, like the French, French expatriates have France,
yes,
and English expatriates have England. We Jews who live in the diaspora, who are products of all of this imperialist ethnic cleansing, have a right to our territory too, because the history of the Jews is ferocious. The Jews have been, at one point or another, tossed out of every single country they've been in, including England. In roughly 1100 A.D., we were tossed out of England. We weren't allowed back in again until Oliver Cromwell in roughly 1650. So in every country there has been anti-Semitism, and in every country there has been an attempt to ethnically expel us. And the result is that if we don't have our own territory to go to, when, for example, a little guy named Adolf Hitler, who looks like a crazy little Charlie Chaplin lookalike, takes over Germany, think how absurd that was. If you had been a Jew in 1933 when Hitler took over, and I had told you, you better get out of there, you would have said to me, are you crazy? This guy looks like a comedian. He shouts all of his speeches. This is the most sophisticated country in the history of the world. It is the country of Mozart and Beethoven. It is the country of Goethe and Schiller. It is the country that gave birth to modern physics. You think that this crazy little munchkin is going to take this place over and threaten us?
Howard, stand by. We've got to take our news break at the bottom of the hour. HowardBloom.net is his website. And Howard and I will be back on the other side of this news break as we continue here in the X Zone from Hamilton, Ontario, Canada. Don't go away. Are you considering calling a psychic to read your situation? Then consider David Champion, a psychic medium for more than 20 years with thousands of readings under his belt. David Champion will make you feel comfortable. He has proven to be honest and accurate. He's a straight shooter. There's no guesswork. What he sees is what you get. While he is a medium, most of the calls focus on relationships, not only love, but work, school, neighbors, and more. Need help with finding a job and preparing for the interview? Are you dealing with people who are obstacles in your path? For more information, go to davidchampion.com, $1.50 per minute paid by credit card with a minimum of 30 minutes. For your reading with David Champion, call 1-877-702-8598. That's 1-877-702-8598. Now you can dial in to listen to the X-Zone Radio Show from anywhere in the world with Rob McConnell 24/7, 365 by dialing 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080. If you have a mobile phone or landline, the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell is now at your beck and call at 213-401-0080. That's 213-401-0080, 24/7, 365.
The following program may contain coarse language, violence, nudity, mature subject matter, or scenes which may not be suitable for all viewers. Viewer discretion is advised.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Howard Bloom is my guest this hour, www.howardbloom.net. And if you'd like to get a copy of Howard's latest ebook, it's entitled The Mohammed Code. It's available on Amazon.com. All right, Howard, you kind of brought us up to the reasoning behind the conflict that we're watching develop moment by moment in the Gaza Strip. But I have to ask you a question, my friend. Why have the Jewish people always faced such hatred?
Well, there's an experiment. It was done back in the 1940s, in the days when there was research, heavy-duty research on what's called the frustration-aggression hypothesis. Mm-hmm. And you put 7 rats on a hot plate. You turn up the heat, and you wait to see what will happen. So actually the researchers had no idea of what would happen. They knew only one thing, that when you frustrate a rat, it takes out its frustration in the form of aggression. It beats up somebody else. And in the case of 7 rats on a hot plate, the 6 strongest rats immediately figured out who they were, and they immediately figured out who the weakest was. And then they beat the crap out of the weakest rat. So this scapegoating instinct, when we run into frustrating situations, is an automatic. It's built into us as mammals. And once upon a time in roughly 200 BC, there were roughly 100,000 Jews living in the city of Alexandria in Egypt. And the Alexandrians invented anti-Semitism. And then it spread around the world. Now, one of the difficulties of the 7 rats on a hot plate is having to figure out who the weakest is. But if the weakest wears a label and everybody agrees on who the weakest is, you don't have to go through that decision-making process. You don't have to go through all the pain and grief of figuring it out. And that's basically the role that the Jews have played in the world for the last 2,200 years. And it has been so universal that in Japan, during the 1980s and 1990s, there were 2 anti-Semitic books. Japan has half the population of the United States. Selling 100,000 books in the United States is a big deal, and these books sold over 1 million copies each. How many Jews do you think your average Japanese has ever seen in a lifetime?
Not many.
None. Yeah, right, exactly, none. So we humans have such a deep need for somebody to kick the bejesus out of that when world culture offers one convenient scapegoat, it makes life easier for everybody, except, of course, the people who are being kicked around, and I happen to be one of them. And I raise a great big middle finger to those who would like to kick me around, because I have no intention of being kicked around.
No one should be able to kick anyone else around. Mind you, that's according to the philosophy of the world by Rob, and nobody gives a damn about that.
But then we have the situation of the so-called Palestinians back in. And I say the so-called Palestinians because to me, and remember I'm biased, but In 1963, there was no such thing as the Palestinians. Nobody had ever heard of the Palestinians. There was no PLO, Palestine Liberation Organization. There was no history of a Palestinian people. There had never been a Palestinian people. Now, there were people who were refugees from Israel, and I'll give you the Israeli point of view on this. In 1948, when Israel was declared by the United Nations, 5 Arab countries decided to go to war against Israel. Now remember, for every Jew in the war, for every Jew in Israel, there are 250 Arabs. This is a ratio of 250 to 1. This is not a fair fight. And 5 Arab nations decided